Hi everyone, welcome back. We're carrying on with homeostasis today. I'm going to be taking a look at the eye. I'm going to be splitting this into two parts because there's quite a lot to cover and there's a lot of structures. So today we're going to look at the structures themselves, and then in our next video we're going to have a look at the function and looking at nearsightedness and short-sightedness. But for now, we're going to look at the main structures of the eye. There's going to be some drawing involved, I'm afraid, or you're welcome depending on your thoughts and feelings. I'm very excited to draw it though. The pupil reflex, so what happens when our pupils get smaller and bigger. And a little bit extra, it's not necessarily on the syllabus, but it really does help you understand how the eye functions, and I think it's interesting, are rod and cone cells. So grab some paper, grab some pens, and follow along with me. We're going to start off, as we always do, with some definitions. So let's look at the definition of what the eye is. Now, I'm sure you know what an eye is. You're using them now to look at me, and I'm using them to stare ever longingly into the abyss that is the lens in front of me. But your eye itself, if we're thinking of GCSE, is a structure or a sense organ that detects light and colour. Looking at this definition, we're going to have to delve a little bit deeper. So the eye is a sense organ that contains light and colour sensitive receptors. Now here's a term that we've come across before, receptors. We need to remember that receptors are any organ or part of your body that detects a stimulus, a change in the environment. So you've got eyes, your ears, your skin, for example, detects temperature and pressure changes. And the stimuli in our case with the eye is this light and colour. And from the introduction I mentioned rod and cone cells, and it's these two types of cells that give you all the light and dark and colour vision that you have. Okay, before we carry on with and looking at the actual structures of the eye in terms of a diagram, we're just going to note down these names just to get familiar with them. So there are a few main parts of the eye that you need to know for GCSE. There are far more in reality, so if you go Googling and find a picture with other parts and you go, well, Miss Reese lied to us, or she doesn't know what she's talking about. Just as always in life, trust me when I say it's complicated, and you can always have A-level biology if you want to delve in even further. So the main structures that you need to know about, I'm going to be colour coding them, and then when I draw the diagram I'm going to use that colour to depict that area. Just hopefully you can start from a glance looking and seeing what areas correspond with which part. You are going to be expected to know them, to be able to label them on a diagram, so hopefully if you use colour or use some sort of system for depicting different areas and associating those areas with those words, it'll make it easier for you to look at the cornea, for example, just at the front of the eye. You'll never, for example, associate it with the retina that's at the back of the eye. Okay, your first structure is the retina. Your next key structure is your sclera. You have the optic nerve. You've got the cornea. You've got that colourful part of your eye, the iris. You have your ciliary muscles. You have your suspensory ligaments. And lastly, you have the pupil. Okay, I'm going to be drawing the main structures of the eye now, and again, you aren't expected to be, the next big thing in art. You just need to be able to draw the structures generally, not even draw them in an exam, be able to label them based on a picture. So if you want to simplify things and use blobs, by no means you don't have to be a great artist. So let's start by drawing the overall shape. Now your eye is roughly spherical. Some people's eyes will be certain wonkier shapes depending on if they have certain defects with their eye that affect your vision. We'll be looking at vision and short-sightedness and long-sightedness in the next video. So your eye has a spherical shape, but there's also this sort of bump at the front. This is see-through. This is where most of your light's coming through. So this is the front of the eye, this is the back of the eye, you've got the big tube here for the optic nerve. Okay, I'm going to start by just looking at this structure here, the cornea. The cornea is a it's just the covering. So the white part you see of your eyes, the sclera, it goes all the way around. It's just a protective layer mainly. Next I'm going to put the retina on. Next we're going to put the optic nerve on. Next we're going to add the iris, that's the coloured part of your eye. Now we're going to add the cornea, the ciliary muscles, the suspensory ligaments, and the lens that attaches there. And finally the pupil. So those are our main structures of the eye. What we need to look at now is what each of them do. So what I'm going to do is by each one, trying to keep the colour coding going, I'm just going to be putting what each one does. You can add it to a diagram yourselves, or you can either put it in a table, whatever works for you. So let's start with the cornea. I will use the correct colour this time. The cornea is a clear layer on the outside of your eye. It's transparent, and what it does is it bends or refracts the light as it enters your eye to help start focusing that light onto the cells at the back of the retina. You will have probably done refraction in physics, so apply those ideas there, that refraction is bending of the light. So the light will go in through the cornea and refract slightly, and then as it passes through this part of the sclera, so it's still clear, it's going to refract again, and when the light passes through the lens, it'll be further focused. Think of doing zooming, or not zooming, sorry, focusing with your camera, and then the light's going to enter back. So this is the first part that starts refracting that light. Next is the iris. The iris works very much like the shutter on a camera. It can change its size, and we'll look at that more when we look at the pupil reflex, in order to adjust the intensity of the light that's hitting your retina. So when light is dim, it will be the pupil will be wider, not because the pupil is changing, but the iris itself is opening up like a viewfinder and pulling the iris further apart. And then when light gets brighter, the pupil's not getting smaller because of anything the pupil's doing itself. The iris is being pulled together again like an aperture of a camera, and that is stopping light getting through. So the pupil itself is just a hole that allows light to enter, and the iris is the part that adjusts how much light gets in. Next part we're going to look at is this bit, the lens. The lens takes that refracted light that's come through the cornea and refracts it even more to focus that light onto the retina itself. So the layer of cells here, these rod and cone cells that do your light and dark vision and your colour vision as well. But for now, you just need to know that the lens further reflects light onto the retina. The retina is the next part. It's the part that actually allows you to see me talking to you now. It's what controls your light vision and dark vision. Not saying that you can see in the dark, but it's this sort of that low level vision we can see at night. If you have very dim light, maybe you'll notice that things look black and white. That's to do with how the cells that are called cone cells, we'll look at in a minute, they detect colour, but they also only work in high brightnesses of light. So if you go out at night and light is very dim, often you'll lose the colour, or you won't see colour, as the cone cells that work in low levels of light have no capability to detect colour at all. There's actually a really cool clip that I'll try and put in now, which shows a deep sea diving team taking a strip of, I think it was bits of pen, and they took them down in a submersible that went down far enough that light cut the different colours of light to the wavelengths could not penetrate through. So by the end of the video, or the end of the clip, you'll see that the colour is pretty much lost entirely. You only see sort of blues and some reds by the end, because those are the only wavelengths of light that can penetrate that far into water. Okay, next is the optic nerve. That is just, as the name suggests, a large nerve that connects your optic. So optic just talks with sight, so your eye directly to the brain. That would of course make the optic nerve which type of neuron? That's right, sensory neuron. Person that's not there. I know you all said it to the screen, I can tell. I've already gone mad and it's only week 2 of quarantine. Right, the last bit we're going to look at are the ciliary muscles and suspensory ligaments. The ciliary muscles are basically the muscles that control the stretching and squashing of your lens. So the lens inside your eye is not like a lens of a camera, which is made of glass and it's solid, or lenses in fish actually are kind of like little beads. They're really quite solid, so they can't adjust their focus. Our lenses, if you get to see the eye dissection, if we ever go back to school properly, is jelly-like. I'd say it's, if you've ever put like a gummy bear or something in a glass of water overnight and it swells a bit, or those Orbeez, but not quite as firm. It's sort of that consistency, and it can be pulled tighter to make it flatter, or the ciliary muscles can relax and it can become more spherical, and that is what adjusts the focus. So that's why if you look at something really close, the background's often blurry, because the ciliary muscles are making the lens focus on whatever you're looking directly at, and the rest of it goes out of focus because the light is being scattered, or the light is not being refracted in the right way to hit that retina at the back. The last bit, the suspensory ligaments, are they're nothing special. They're just small ligaments, connective tissue that holds the lens and the ciliary muscles together. No disrespect meant to sensory ligaments. I'm sure you do a very good job. Next thing we're going to look at is the pupil reflex. Sorry if the 2 giant eyeballs are a bit frightening, but hey ho. This one is a pupil that is very wide, so this is low light conditions or dim light. And this one over there with the small pupil is intense light or bright light. Now your iris, if you look very close under a mirror, or you look up a picture of an iris up close, you'll notice that it's not smooth, it's very pocketed, almost like looking at a canyon or a rocky mountain top. The reason why it looks like this is to do with sort of the muscles that make up the iris. So the iris is made up of 2 sets of muscles. You have radial muscles. If you think of radiuses and circles, those are round muscles that go around the inside area of your iris. So you see them better on this one. And you have radial muscles as well. Think about radius as the outside of a circle, so that's the outer muscles. They are horizontal, and the circular muscles are circular. Now, in dim light conditions, we need to maximize the amount of light that's getting through the pupil and onto the retina to get those rod cones firing up so we can see in low light. So what will happen is these circular muscles in the middle relax, so they sort of open up, and the radial muscles contract and pull the pupil, pull the iris out and make the pupil, the hole, bigger. In bright light conditions, the opposite happens. In case you're wondering why we want less light and not more, is the cells at the back, the rod and cone cells, are really, really sensitive to photons, which is what in part makes up light. So if you allow too much light to enter, the energy that's passed on from those photons actually overloads the sensors, so that's how you become blind or damage your retina if you look directly at the sun. Extra little tidbit for you today. In your eye, you have 2 types of modified neurons, nerve cells, that are responsible for all of the colour vision and low light vision that you have. There are 2 main types. There are rod cells, which are rod-like in shape. I'll draw one now and you'll see what I mean. So rod cells are what you use for seeing in low light conditions. These work best when the light is very, very low. They can even be triggered by one single photon, so one particle of energy that's coming from that light wavelength. They are much greater in your eye. You have about 120 million rod cells in your eye, and they are tucked away in the very edges of your retina in here and here. You don't have as many, partly because they're so sensitive that too much light, if they were further back where the light is being most concentrated, they would get damaged. And also we, as a species, aren't evolved, you know, we've evolved to take benefit of the daytime and run long distances, not creep around at night. So animals that have much better night vision often have a huge, much larger areas of rod cells in their eyes, and they have more rod cells per area, so they're jammed in tight. Your cone cells then look sort of like ice creams upside down. You'll see when I draw one. So your cone cell looks like a bit like a traffic cone or a carrot that's upside down. These detect bright light and colour. You have far fewer of these in your eye. You only have around 6 million. And these are much, much less sensitive, so they only fire, or they only send off an impulse if a larger number of photons are detected. And on the diagram you can see that they are widespread along the back of the retina. There's also one space on your retina that I haven't mentioned, I probably should, is this bit here. So where the optic nerve meets the eye, this is your blind spot. So that means there is an area where the nerve connects, there are no rod or cone cells, and that's when you sort of look at your blind spot in your car. There's an area off to the side where you cannot see, and there are a number of tricks you can do. I'm sure there's some if you give it a Google, or you've probably done some before on YouTube about putting things in your blind spot. So that's why it's there. It's literally an area that is totally blind because you have a giant thick old nerve there instead. Right, that's us done for today. I will see you really soon to look at part 2 of the eye. We're going to look at how the eye focuses light and look at near and short-sightedness. For now, just make sure that you look over mainly the structures of the eye and what they do, and the pupil reflex and how that works. And I will see you all very soon.